It's been said that better questions lead us naturally to better answers, and that it's in not knowing that we open the doorway to knowing. I'm Scott Lennox, and you're listening to The Beautiful Question, a consideration of things that truly matter in a complex world. Have you ever found yourself hooked into something that was none of your business? Have you ever hooked yourself when you absolutely knew better? Have you ever found it hard to get unhooked again? Join me this week as we consider what it means to get hooked and ways of getting unhooked and staying that way. Decades ago, while spending the summer as a student pastor in a small town in Arkansas, something happened that would have been laughable had it not been so painful for the person involved, and had it not been such a poignant lesson for me. When one of the young men in the congregation asked me to go creek fishing with him on a farm a few miles from town, I happily accepted. The farm belonged to one of the families in the church and had a narrow stream spanning its northern edge. Winding quietly through dense brush and thick trees, I knew that it would be an ideal place to go fishing. I'd already spent hours wandering there and had seen several large bass lurking in the shadows of the undercuts where the water was calm. Since my previous fishing had all been done on open lakes and rivers, I knew that the ultralight tackle we'd be using would make our time both challenging and interesting. On the morning he arrived to pick me up, my young companion had one of his bird dogs in the back of his truck. Jumping restlessly from one side of the bed to the other, it was obvious that the dog was ready for action. I had serious reservations, but I kept them to myself. Sure enough, we were no sooner out of the truck when the dog went bounding over the side and through the trees and out into the creek. The way he was leaping and barking, I was sure he had scared away every fish from Arkansas to the Canadian border. After half an hour of doing my best to be patient and not a fish in sight, I suggested an alternative. "Let's try something different," I said. "Give me a 15-minute head start while I work my way up the creek. Then you and Rocket here can come along behind me." I wasn't sure whether or not he fully grasped the problem, but he agreed, and I was quickly on my way, stopping now and then to listen. The more I heard the dog yelping and thrashing through the brush in the distance behind me, the more certain I was that my young friend would not be having the fish dinner he'd been planning. I shook my head and kept going, catching and releasing several good-sized bass over the next 45 minutes. Then I heard screaming. Dropping my gear, I followed the sound of his wailing and raced to find him. As I rounded a bend, I spotted him about 50 yards away with terror in his eyes. He was standing bent forward at the waist with his arms outstretched, still clutching his rod in one hand. At first, I thought he'd been bitten by a snake, but as I got closer, I caught the flash of a treble-hooked lure dangling from his cheek just below his left eye. Relieved that he wasn't snake-bit, I reached for the needle-nose pliers in my back pocket as I asked him what happened. "My lure got hung up on a branch," he said, pointing over his shoulder. There was such panic in his voice, I thought he might faint. "And?" I asked. "Well, I tugged on it, but it wouldn't let go." Before he said another word, I could see exactly how he hooked himself. "I jerked real hard," he said, "and the dang thing shot straight at me." I might have laughed had I not recognized that I'd done the same thing to myself on more than one occasion, just not with fishing tackle or treble hooks. Since his cheek was already numb, he didn't feel it when I clipped off the barb and backed the hook out of his face. He was lucky to have lost only his pride. He could easily have lost an eye. The irony is that all he would have had to do was walk over to the lure and lift it from the branch. Problem solved, and no damage done. Later that evening, as I watched the sun go down, I thought of some of the ways I had hooked myself by allowing myself to be caught up in other people's drama or manipulation, or hooked into situations that were none of my business. I thought of times when I had pulled hard, when it was best to stay perfectly still and do nothing at all. I thought of times when I'd committed myself to things that I had no business being involved in. I thought of negative ideas that dug deeper into me as I kept feeding them with my thinking. I thought of toxic relationships I'd stayed in far too long. I thought of ideologies or ways of seeing the world that ran counter to what I knew to be good for me, what I knew to be right. I thought of acts of willfulness where I knew better, but nonetheless hooked myself just as deeply as my young friend at the creek. Looking back, in each case I had to admit that it wasn't fate or the world or someone else that was my problem. It was me. I was the one who set the hook. Others only provided the bait. I realized that while I learned from some of those situations, most of the things I hooked myself into could have easily been avoided had I relaxed and allowed myself to return to a state of stillness and clarity. I can't do anything to change the past, but I can certainly live a better today by staying calm and keeping myself unhooked. Isn't it amazing how quickly and how deeply we can set the hook when we're being hasty or when we're applying unnecessary pressure? As a wise friend in Taos recently said, there are times when leaning in is the problem, and there are moments when we allow ourselves to become entangled by our own good intentions. The secret is to stay present and keep my heart and mind open, and sometimes to back away entirely. In the end, the choices belong to us and to no one else. So, in the spirit of staying unhooked, here are this week's beautiful questions. Question 1. What are you currently agreeing to or involved in that you know is not good for you? 2. What unproductive habits have you developed that are not serving you well or that are actually causing you harm? Question 3. What measurable steps will you take as quickly as you can to step away from those entanglements and live your life at a higher level? Number 4. What is the least amount of pressure needed to untangle yourself from some of the knots, N-O-T-S, in your own thinking? Question 5. What is the least painful way to unhook yourself when it does happen, regardless of the situation or the circumstance? And question 6. What things might you do to become more aware and to keep yourself from becoming hooked before it happens? As you contemplate these questions and questions of your own, it will be interesting to see what emerges in your thinking and in your emotions and in your life. Write and tell me about it. As I say each week, my light with your light. Thank you once again for listening. I'm continually inspired by our collaboration as we work and play together, building better lives and better possibilities for ourselves, for one another, for the world, and for our beautiful planet home. I look forward to your comments and to your feedback. You can also be inspired by visiting my good friends at Cosmos Journal. That's K-O-S-M-O-S Journal. Their mission is to inform, inspire, and engage global transformation in harmony with all life. You can easily find them online at cosmosjournal.org. And as always, you can find my free podcasts and guided relaxation audios by searching for The Beautiful Question in Apple Podcasts, in SoundCloud, or CastBox, or by visiting the podcast page of my website at scottlennox.com. If you find them useful or encouraging, don't hesitate to share them. I'm Scott Lennox, and this has been The Beautiful Question. The Beautiful Question is a One Light production, written, recorded, produced, and funded by Scott Lennox at Heart Rock Studios in Fort Worth, Texas, as a way of paying forward to life, being fully present, becoming better engaged with things that truly matter in a complex world, and committing to a healthy future for all of us.